The dinner party in our Chicago penthouse was supposed to be a celebration of her promotion, the air thick with expensive Merlot and polite laughter. But when the guests thinned out, I found my wife not tidying up, but nestled comfortably on Julian's lap in the dim light of the den. It wasn't the act itself, but the terrifying ease of it. The muscle memory of two bodies that had done this 1,000 times before. And when she caught my eye, she didn't jump up. She just smiled that practiced, innocent smile. If you have ever felt the ground crumble beneath you in a single silent moment, stay with me. Because we need to walk through this wreckage together to find out what happens when the silence finally breaks. The ice in the tumblers had melted hours ago. The dinner party, a celebration of Sarah's promotion to senior VP, had officially wound down. The last of the guests, a cluster of marketing directors and tech consultants, had filtered out into the biting Chicago wind 10 minutes ago, leaving the penthouse quiet. The air inside was heavy with the scent of expensive Merlot, truffle oil, and the lingering static charge of social performance. Ethan Hart loosened his tie, the silk slipping through his fingers like water. He was exhausted. He had spent 4 hours playing the supportive husband, refilling glasses, laughing at jokes he'd heard a dozen times, and playing the perfect backdrop to Sarah's shining moment. He walked toward the kitchen to start the dishwasher, seeking the comfort of a mechanical task, but stopped when he noticed the light was still on in the den. He didn't mean to be quiet. The plush Persian rug simply absorbed his footsteps. The door was ajar. Through the gap, the scene framed itself like a photograph Ethan would never be able to burn from his retina. Sarah was there, and so was Julian. Julian, the college friend. Julian, who had toasted Ethan at their wedding. Julian, who was currently sitting in Ethan's leather Eames chair, a glass of scotch balanced precariously on the armrest. Sarah wasn't sitting in the chair opposite him. She was straddling him. It wasn't sexual in the frantic, animalistic way of a cheap motel affair. It was worse. It was domestic. It was comfortable. Her arm was draped around his neck, her fingers idly playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. She was whispering something close to his ear, and Julian was laughing, a low, intimate rumble that vibrated through the room. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway. His breath hitched, a sharp intake of air that felt like swallowing glass. Sarah turned her head. Her eyes locked with Ethan's. For a second, he expected her to jump. He expected guilt, panic, the clumsy scramble of bodies trying to separate. But she didn't move. She didn't slide off Julian's lap. Instead, she offered a languid, almost annoyed smile, her cheeks flushed with wine and adrenaline. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth, devoid of shame. "Don't look like that. We were just celebrating." Ethan stepped into the room. The air felt thin. "You're sitting on his lap, Sarah." "Oh, God, don't be dramatic," she sighed, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling before finally, slowly, sliding off Julian's knees. She smoothed her skirt, looking at Ethan as if he were the one who had committed a faux pas by interrupting. "He's just a friend. You know that. We're just blowing off steam." Julian took a sip of his scotch, not meeting Ethan's eyes, a smirk playing on his lips. "Congrats on the promotion, Sarah," Julian mumbled, the dismissal in his tone clear. "You don't matter here, Ethan." "Just a friend," Ethan repeated. The words tasted like ash. "Yes, a friend," Sarah snapped, her patience thinning. "I'm exhausted, Ethan. I don't have the energy for your insecurity tonight." Something inside Ethan, a structural beam that had been holding up the weight of their 5-year marriage, snapped. It was a silent failure. No explosion, just a collapse. He looked at the woman he had bought this apartment for. He looked at the man who ate at their table every Thanksgiving. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay?" Sarah frowned, confused by the lack of a fight. "Okay," he said again. softer this time. Ethan turned around and walked out of the den. He didn't go to the kitchen. He walked past the master bedroom, past the gallery wall of their vacation photos in Napa and Tulum, and into the guest room where they kept the luggage. He pulled his Toomey carry-on from the top shelf. The zipper made a sharp, tearing sound in the quiet hallway. He didn't pack everything. He didn't pack the framed photo of them on his nightstand. He didn't pack the watch she gave him for their anniversary. He packed 3 suits, 5 shirts, underwear, his toiletries, and his laptop. He moved with the precision of an architect drafting a demolition plan. Efficient, cold. "Ethan?" Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, holding a glass of water, looking more exasperated than worried. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," he said, folding a white dress shirt. "Stop it. You're drunk." "I haven't had a drop to drink all night, Sarah. I was driving your friends home." He zipped the bag shut. The sound was final, like a gavel hitting wood. "Where are you going?" She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "To a hotel? Over this? Ethan, he literally just gave me a hug." Ethan stood up, gripping the handle of the suitcase. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the stranger hiding behind his wife's face. "He was inside you, Sarah," Ethan said calmly. "Maybe not tonight. Maybe not physically right this second. But emotionally. He's been inside our marriage for years. And tonight, you showed me there's no room left for me." "You're crazy," she hissed, her face hardening. "If you walk out that door, Ethan, don't expect me to be here when you come crawling back, begging for forgiveness for acting like a child." Ethan walked past her. He didn't touch her. He didn't look back at Julian, who was likely still sipping scotch in the den. He walked to the front door, the wheels of his suitcase humming over the hardwood floor. He opened the heavy oak door. The hallway draft hit him, cold and sobering. "Marriage over," he whispered to the empty corridor. He closed the door behind him. The lock clicked, and for the first time in 5 years, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like survival. The Chicago wind didn't just blow, it bit. It chewed through the layers of Ethan's wool coat the moment he stepped out of the lobby doors, assaulting him with the damp, freezing breath of Lake Michigan. "Mr. Hart?" The doorman, Henry, a man who had known Ethan's schedule for 5 years, stepped forward, his brow furrowed. He looked at the single suitcase in Ethan's hand, then back at the revolving glass doors where the warm, golden light of the lobby spilled out. "Do you need a cab, sir? It's nearly 1 in the morning." "Yes, Henry, please." Ethan's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Mechanical. Flat. He didn't look up at the penthouse windows. He knew she wouldn't be looking down. She would be in the den, pouring another glass of wine, perhaps laughing with Julian about how dramatic Ethan was being, confident that he would be back before breakfast. That was the script. Ethan was the steady one, the beam that bore the load. Beams didn't just walk away. When the taxi arrived, the interior smelled of stale pine air freshener and old leather. Ethan slid in, the suitcase taking up the seat beside him like a passenger. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing him in the rearview mirror. Ethan paused. Where to? He had designed residential towers in the Loop, renovated brownstones in Lincoln Park, and drafted the plans for the very apartment he had just left. He had built homes for hundreds of people, yet at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, he had nowhere to go. The Langham, Ethan said. It was impersonal, corporate, a place where businessmen went to sleep between meetings, not where husbands went to mourn marriages. As the car merged onto North Wabash Avenue, the phone in his pocket began to vibrate against his thigh. It wasn't a ring. It was a relentless, angry buzz. Buzz, buzz, buzz. He pulled it out. The screen lit up the dark cab. Sarah, 1:12 a.m. Are you serious? Pick up the phone. Sarah, 1:13 a.m. This is embarrassing, Ethan. Julian just left. Come back upstairs. Sarah, 1:15 a.m. You're acting like a psycho. We did nothing wrong. Ethan stared at the messages. The blue bubbles popped up one after another, a digital assault. She wasn't apologizing. She was managing the situation. She was trying to frame the narrative before the cement dried. If he replied, if he typed even a single word, he would be engaging in a negotiation, and you don't negotiate with a lie. He pressed the side button, silencing the device, but the screen lit up again immediately. A photo. It was a selfie of them from last month, smiling on a boat in Lake Geneva. Sarah, 1:20 a.m. Don't throw this away because you're insecure. The word insecure hit him harder than the wind outside. It was her favorite weapon. It shifted the blame from her betrayal to his reaction. If he was hurt, it was because he was weak, not because she was unfaithful. The taxi pulled up to the hotel. The glass tower rose into the night, cold and magnificent. Ethan checked in with a credit card that was linked to their joint account. Let her see the charge. Let her see the timestamp. It was the only communication he intended to offer. The room on the 14th floor was luxurious in a way that felt completely dead. Beige walls, crisp white linens, abstract art that meant nothing. It was the architecture of transience. He placed his suitcase on the luggage rack but didn't open it. To unpack would be to admit he was staying. To not unpack was to admit he had nowhere else to go. He sat on the edge of the bed, the room silent except for the low hum of the HVAC system. He took his phone out one last time. Sarah, 1:45 a.m. Fine, run away, see if I care. And then 3 minutes later, Sarah, 1:48 a.m. Ethan, please. The shift from aggression to desperation was textbook. He knew her patterns. He knew her better than he knew himself. Ethan held the power button down. The screen went black. The little Apple logo appeared, then faded into nothingness. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below him, the Chicago River was a black vein cutting through the city, reflecting the lights of buildings where thousands of people were sleeping next to someone they trusted. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He was alone. The silence of the hotel room was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. But for the first time that night, it was honest. The architecture firm of Sterling and Hart was a temple of glass and concrete, designed to let light in from every angle. Usually, Ethan found clarity here. The rigid lines of blueprints and the mathematical certainty of structural loads were a refuge from the chaos of life. But today, the open plan office felt like an aquarium. He sat at his desk, staring at a CAD rendering of a library annex in Evanston. The cursor blinked on the screen, a rhythmic pulse that mocked his inability to focus. His phone, which he had finally turned back on during the commute, sat face down on the desk. It had been vibrating intermittently since 9 a.m. Not from Sarah this time, but from the Circle, their mutual friends. Buzz. He ignored it. He zoomed in on a staircase detail on his screen, trying to calculate the load-bearing capacity of the landing. Buzz. Ethan flipped the phone over. A text from Mark, a college buddy who had been at the party last night. Mark, 10:15 a.m. Hey man, just saw Sarah's post. You doing okay? We're all worried about you. Let me know if you need to crash or just talk. Stress is no joke. Ethan frowned. Stress? He opened Instagram. His thumb hovered over the icon, a portal to a world he suddenly didn't want to see. He tapped it. Sarah hadn't posted about the breakup explicitly. That would be too messy, too low class for a PR executive. Instead, she had posted a black and white photo of a stormy Chicago skyline taken from their balcony, the balcony he paid for. The caption was a masterclass in vague booking. Sometimes the people we love crumble under the pressure of their own minds, sending love and light to my husband as he works through his demons. Please respect our privacy while we navigate this difficult mental health break. Marriage takes strength, hakshar, patience. Ethan felt the bile rise in his throat. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was diagnosing him. She had taken his silence, his dignity, and his departure, and repackaged them as a mental breakdown. In her narrative, she wasn't the cheating wife. She was the long-suffering saint standing by her unstable husband. He looked up. Across the office, his assistant, Elena, was typing furiously. She glanced at him, then quickly looked away. Did she know? Had Sarah's digital ripples reached even here? Ethan minimized the window on his computer. The blueprint was gone, replaced by the memory of the den. The way Sarah's hand had looked on Julian's neck. The way she hadn't jumped up. That wasn't a hallucination. That wasn't stress. That was infidelity wrapped in casual cruelty. Another text came through, this time from Julian. Julian, 10:30 a.m. She's really worried, E. Don't be a ghost. It's scaring her. The audacity stole the breath from his lungs. The man who had sat in his chair, drinking his scotch, holding his wife, was now texting him advice on how to be a better husband. Ethan typed a reply. I saw you. His finger hovered over the send button. If he sent it, the war would start. They would call him paranoid. They would say he was imagining the intimacy, that he was jealous of a harmless friendship. Sarah had already primed the audience. Any anger he showed now would just be proof of the demons she had posted about. Ethan deleted the text. He deleted the thread. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. He couldn't be in this glass box anymore. He needed air, even if it was the exhaust-filled air of Wacker Drive. Mr. Hart, Elena called out as he walked past her desk. The client meeting for the Riverside project is in 20 minutes. Cancel it, Ethan said, not breaking his stride. Sir, that's $1 million contract. Tell them I have a family emergency, Ethan said, pushing open the heavy glass doors. Tell them my wife is spinning a story, and I need to go find the ground before it disappears. He didn't wait for her confusion. He stepped into the elevator, the metal doors closing him in, sealing him away from the whispers, the likes, and the comments section that was currently dissecting the corpse of his marriage. The penthouse felt larger than Sarah remembered. Without Ethan's quiet presence, the rustle of his blueprints in the study, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables in the kitchen at 7 p.m., the news playing softly in the background, the apartment was just a collection of expensive furniture in a silent room. Sarah told herself this was freedom. No more judgment. No more feeling like she had to dim her light to match his serious, brooding intensity. She met Julian at the aviary for drinks 2 days after Ethan left. It was their usual spot, a place of liquid nitrogen cocktails and dim, amber lighting. Before, these meetups had felt electric, charged with the thrill of what they weren't doing. They were just two attractive people, best friends, flirting on the safe side of the line. But tonight, the line was gone. He blocked me, Sarah said, stirring her drink aggressively. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp, irritating sound. Can you believe that? 5 years of marriage and he just ghosted me. No discussion, no closure. It's so cowardly. She looked at Julian, waiting for him to agree, to validate her anger, to tell her that Ethan was unworthy of her vibrant spirit. Julian was scrolling through his phone. He offered a non-committal hum, his thumb swiping up on a screen that reflected in his glasses. Julian, Sarah pressed. He looked up, blinking as if waking from a nap. Sorry. Yeah. Ethan. Cowardly. Total overreaction. He took a sip of his whiskey. But hey, you said you needed space, right? Now you have it. I didn't want this kind of space, Sarah snapped, her voice rising slightly. A couple at the next table glanced over. Sarah lowered her voice, leaning in. I'm scared, Julian. He took his suits. He took the checkbook. What if he actually files? What am I supposed to do? She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. She needed an anchor. She needed him to say, "We'll figure it out," or even, "I'm here for you." Julian gently, but firmly, pulled his hand away. He picked up his glass, creating a physical barrier between them. "Sarah," he said, his tone shifting from playful to guarded, "you're spiraling. This is heavy stuff. Maybe you should call a therapist. Or your mom." The rejection was subtle, but it hit her like a slap. "I'm talking to my best friend," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm talking to the guy who held me the other night." "Whoa!" Julian laughed, a dry, nervous sound. He looked around the bar, checking if anyone was listening. "Let's not rewrite history. You sat on my lap. We were drunk. It wasn't a thing. Don't make it a thing. You know I'm not built for the drama, Sarah. I'm a venture capitalist, not a divorce lawyer." Sarah sat back, the plush velvet booth suddenly feeling hard against her spine. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the expensive watch, the perfectly styled hair, the charming grin that had always made her feel special. But now, stripped of the taboo, stripped of the forbidden fruit context, he just looked bored. He wasn't her soulmate. He was a mirror. He only reflected what she wanted to see when she was unhappy with Ethan. He liked the attention of a married woman because it required zero commitment. Now that she was effectively single, the game wasn't fun anymore. It was work. "I blew up my life," Sarah whispered, the realization dawning on her with the cold clarity of the ice melting in her glass. "You're being dramatic again," Julian said, signaling the waiter for the check. "Ethan will be back. Guys like him always come back. He's just punishing you. Just ride it out." He stood up, buttoning his blazer. "I gotta run. Early meeting tomorrow. You good getting a cab?" He didn't offer to walk her out. He didn't offer to share a ride. He dropped a $100 bill on the table, enough to cover the drinks and buy his exit, and patted her shoulder. It was a gesture one might give a stranger. "See ya, Sarah." She watched him walk away, weaving through the crowd, already checking his phone again. She was left alone at the table, surrounded by the buzz of happy conversations, staring at the empty seat where she thought her future was sitting. The courier did not look like an executioner. He looked like a college student in a windbreaker, chewing gum, holding a tablet and a thick manila envelope. Sarah was in the middle of a strategy meeting for a luxury skincare brand when her assistant knocked on the glass door of the conference room. The interruption was annoying. Sarah prided herself on the seamless flow of her operation. "What is it, Jessica?" Sarah asked, not looking up from her notes. "There's a delivery for you, Sarah. He says it has to be hand-delivered to you personally. Legal requirement." The room went quiet. The phrase legal requirement had a way of sucking the oxygen out of a PR firm. Sarah stood up, smoothing her pencil skirt, forcing a smile for her team. "Probably the lease renewal for the studio. Give me a moment." She walked into the reception area. The courier extended the tablet. She signed. He handed her the envelope. It was heavy. She opened it right there in the lobby, under the recessed lighting that made everything look expensive. She pulled out the top sheet. In the Circuit Court of Cook County, Illinois. Petitioner, Ethan Hart. Respondent, Sarah Hart. Nature of action, dissolution of marriage. The words swam before her eyes. Dissolution. It sounded like chemistry, like acid dissolving bone. He hadn't just hired a lawyer, he had hired the lawyer. The name on the letterhead belonged to a firm known for scorched earth litigation. The mental health break narrative she had constructed evaporated in her hands. This wasn't a break. This was an eviction notice from her own life. 40 minutes later, Sarah pushed past the receptionist at Sterling and Hart. "Ma'am, you can't just go back there," the receptionist called out, her voice rising in alarm. Sarah didn't stop. She marched down the corridor of glass and steel, the envelope clutched in her hand like a weapon. She saw him. Ethan was standing at a drafting table in his corner office, reviewing a blueprint with two junior architects. He looked calm, clean-shaven, focused. He looked like a man who hadn't spent the last week crying. Sarah shoved the glass door open. It slammed against the stopper with a violence that made the entire office floor go silent. "You served me at work," she screamed. The veneer of the cool, collected PR executive was gone. Her hair was slightly windblown, her eyes wild. Ethan looked up. He didn't flinch. He gestured quietly to the two junior architects to leave. They scrambled out, eyes wide, closing the door behind them. "Hello, Sarah," Ethan said. His voice was even, devoid of the warmth she was used to. "Don't you hello me," she hissed, throwing the envelope onto the table. It slid across the blueprints, knocking over a scale ruler. "What is this? Irreconcilable differences? Are you insane? We had one bad night." "We had a bad marriage, Sarah. The night was just the expiration date." "You humiliated me," she shouted, pointing at the door. "My entire team saw that courier. Do you know what this does to my reputation? To my brand?" Ethan walked around the desk. He didn't move toward her. He moved to put distance between them. He leaned against the window, framing himself against the gray city. "That's the difference between us," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "You're worried about your brand. I'm worried about the fact that I can't look at you without seeing him. I told you, nothing happened. It doesn't matter what happened physically, Sarah. You chose him. In that moment, in our home, you chose his comfort over my respect. And now you're here, screaming about your reputation instead of apologizing for my pain." Sarah froze. The truth of his words pierced through her anger. She suddenly felt very small in the large glass room. She looked through the walls. The entire office was watching. The assistant, the partners, the interns. They were all pretending to work, but they were watching the breakdown of the golden couple. "Ethan," her voice cracked, shifting from rage to a terrifying vulnerability. "Please, call the lawyer. Tell him to stop. We can fix this. I'll cut Julian off. I'll delete his number. Just come home." Ethan looked at her. For a second, Sarah saw a flicker of the man who had promised to love her forever. But then, the image of her laughing on Julian's lap seemed to override it. "I don't have a home anymore," Ethan said. "You turned it into a guest house for your ego." He reached for his desk phone and pressed a button. "Elena, can you please escort Mrs. Hart out? She's finished." "You're kicking me out?" Sarah whispered, tears finally spilling over, ruining her mascara. "No," Ethan said, turning back to his blueprints. "I'm setting you free. Go be single, Sarah. It's what you acted like anyway." Sarah stood there for a heartbeat, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to break. He didn't. He picked up a pencil and made a mark on the paper. She turned and ran. She ran past the staring faces, past the whispering receptionist, and into the elevator, the heavy envelope still lying on the desk like a tombstone. Thanksgiving in Chicago was usually a production. In the Hart household, it meant a 20-pound organic turkey, silver cutlery polished to a mirror shine, and a curated playlist of jazz standards. It was a performance of domestic perfection. This year, Thanksgiving was a diner booth on the outskirts of Skokie. Ethan sat near the window, watching the snow flurry under the street lamps. The diner was quiet, occupied only by a few truckers and a tired-looking waitress named Brenda. He had ordered the turkey special, slices of processed meat, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and gravy that was too yellow. It was the worst Thanksgiving dinner he had eaten in 10 years. It was also the most peaceful. There was no tension about whether the wine was breathing long enough, no passive-aggressive comments about his career choices from Sarah's mother, no need to smile when he didn't feel like it. He cut a piece of turkey, ate it, and felt a strange, hollow sort of relief. He checked his phone. His sister in Denver had texted him a photo of her kids. He replied, "Love you guys. Eat some pie for me." He didn't check Instagram. He didn't need to know what he was missing. He was learning that being alone was not the same as being lonely. Being alone was a physical state. Being lonely was what he had felt lying in bed next to Sarah for the last 2 years. 10 miles south, in a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park, Sarah was surrounded by people, yet she felt invisible. It was a Friendsgiving hosted by Mark and Clara, the couple who had introduced Ethan and Sarah 6 years ago. Sarah had spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a velvet dress that was perhaps a bit too cocktail for a dinner party, and applying lipstick with military precision. She needed to look like she was winning. But as she moved through the crowded living room, holding a glass of Pinot Noir like a shield, she felt the temperature drop. Conversations didn't stop when she entered a circle. They just shifted gears awkwardly. Eyes darted away. "So, where's Julian?" Clara asked, handing Sarah a napkin. Her voice was too loud, too bright. "We thought he might come with you." "Oh, he's with his family in Connecticut," Sarah lied. She hadn't heard from Julian in 4 days. "We're taking things slow, just enjoying the freedom." "Right, freedom," Clara said, exchanging a quick, unreadable glance with another woman. "Well, we miss Ethan. Mark is devastated he's not carving the bird this year. It just feels wrong." The comment hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Sarah forced a laugh. "Life goes on, Clara. We're all adults." She excused herself and went to the bathroom. She locked the door and leaned against the marble sink, her reflection staring back at her. The freedom she had bragged about felt like a vacuum. Without Ethan, she wasn't the cool wife. She was just the woman who had blown up the group dynamic. She was the chaos factor. She pulled out her phone. She opened her text thread with Ethan. The last message was his notification that he had canceled the joint credit cards. Sarah, 8:42 p.m. "Happy Thanksgiving, Ethan." She stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the send button. She wanted him to know she was thinking of him. No, that wasn't true. She wanted him to validate her. She wanted him to reply so she could tell Clara, "See? We're civil. He still cares." But then she remembered his face in the office. "I'm setting you free." She deleted the text. She unlocked the door and walked back out into the noise. The laughter was loud, the wine was flowing, and the music was upbeat. But as she looked around the room at the people she had known for years, Sarah realized she was the only one observing the scene rather than living in it. Ethan was eating alone in a diner, but he was real. Sarah was at a party, but she was a ghost. They met at a small coffee shop in the West Loop, neutral ground that belonged to neither of them. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and wet, the kind of Chicago weather that made the city look like a bruised watercolor painting. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early. He ordered a black coffee and sat in the back corner, away from the door. When Sarah walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. The Sarah he knew was a creature of polish and precision. Hair blown out, makeup flawless, clothes tailored to the millimeter. The woman who walked through the door wore a heavy wool coat that looked too big for her, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger. She looked exhausted. She saw him and hesitated, then walked over, sliding into the chair opposite him. She didn't try to hug him. She didn't smile. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. "I have 20 minutes, Sarah," Ethan said. He didn't touch his coffee. "You said it was an emergency, regarding the settlement." "I lied," she said softly. "I just needed you to look at me." Ethan sighed, shifting to stand up. "I'm not doing this. Sit down, please." She reached out across the table, but stopped short of touching his hand. "Please, Ethan, just..." "Listen, no spin, no PR strategy, just me." Ethan looked at her, He saw the dark circles under her eyes. He sat back down. Okay? Speak. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling around her paper cup. I haven't spoken to Julian in 3 weeks. I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I told security at my building not to let him in. That doesn't matter anymore, Sarah. It does to me, she insisted, tears pooling in her eyes. You were right. About everything. It wasn't just a friendship. It was an addiction. I liked the attention. I liked feeling desired by someone who didn't know my flaws, who didn't know I snore, or that I get anxious about money. It was a fantasy. She looked up, the tears finally spilling over. I didn't sleep with him, Ethan. I swear on my life. But I wanted to. In my head, I had already left the marriage. And that's worse, isn't it? Ethan felt a dull ache in his chest. Hearing it out loud, the confirmation of his worst instinct, was both a relief and a knife twist. Yes, it is worse. Because sex is an impulse. What you did, that was 1,000 small decisions. Every text, every lunch, every time you sat on his lap, those were choices to erase me. I know, she sobbed, not wiping the tears away. I'm so sorry. I miss you. I miss us. I miss the way you make coffee. I miss your quiet. I'm drowning without you, Ethan. I'll do anything. Counseling? I'll quit my job. We can move, just don't divorce me. Don't let 5 years die because I was stupid for 3 months. The shop was quiet. The espresso machine hissed in the background. Ethan looked at his wife. He remembered their wedding day. He remembered the way she had looked at him when he passed his licensing exam. He still loved her. That love hadn't vanished. It sat heavy in his gut, a useless, painful weight. I love you, Sarah, Ethan said quietly. Sarah's head snapped up, hope flooding her face. I love you too. We can fix this. If you love me, we can fix anything. Ethan shook his head slowly. The hope on her face shattered. That's the problem, he said, his voice steady but sad. Love isn't enough. I can forgive you. I think eventually I will, but I can never trust you again. Every time you pick up your phone, I'll wonder who it is. Every time you're late, I'll picture you on someone else's lap. I can't live like a warden, Sarah, and you shouldn't live like a prisoner. We can build trust back, she pleaded, reaching for his hand. This time, he let her touch him. Her skin was cold. No, Ethan said gently, pulling his hand away. You broke the glass. We can glue it back together, but we'll always see the cracks. And I don't want to look at my marriage and see cracks for the rest of my life. He stood up. He put a $20 bill on the table to cover the coffee neither of them had drunk. The lawyer will send over the final papers on Friday, Ethan said. Sign them, Sarah. Let us both go. He walked out into the rain. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen Sarah bury her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, finally understanding that some things, once broken, are broken forever. Chicago winters were notorious for their cruelty, but the springs were deceptive. They arrived in fits and starts, a tease of warmth followed by a sudden frost, until finally the gray broke, and the city remembered how to breathe again. 6 months had passed since the ink dried on the decree of dissolution. Ethan had moved out of the hotel and into a loft in the West Loop, a space with exposed brick, high timber ceilings, and enough light to keep a fiddle-leaf fig tree alive. It was smaller than the penthouse, less prestigious, and infinitely quieter. He had designed the interior himself, not to impress guests, but to please himself. There was no white furniture he was afraid to sit on. There were books piled on the floor, jazz records near the turntable, and a drafting table positioned perfectly by the window. On a Saturday afternoon in May, the air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and blooming tulips. Ethan walked through Lincoln Park, a sketchbook tucked under his arm. He had started drawing again, not blueprints for clients, but sketches of the city, gargoyles on old buildings, the curve of the L tracks, the way light hit the water. He paused near the south pond to adjust his scarf. He felt lighter. The phantom weight of the marriage, the constant low-level anxiety of trying to be enough for someone else's ambition, had evaporated. He was alone, yes, but he was no longer lonely. Across the park, near the entrance to the zoo, Sarah adjusted her sunglasses. She was with a group of friends. New friends, mostly. The old circle had fractured, casualties of the divorce. She was laughing at something a man in a navy blazer was saying, a man who looked good on paper, a man who was safe. Then she saw him. Ethan was standing near the water, sketching. He wore a simple gray coat she didn't recognize. He looked different. The tension that used to live in his shoulders was gone. He looked younger, less guarded. Sarah stopped walking. The laughter in her throat died. "Sarah, you coming?" the man in the blazer asked, touching her elbow. "Just a second," she whispered. She watched Ethan turn the page of his sketchbook. He looked up at the sky, squinting against the sun, and a small, private smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile for an audience. It wasn't a smile for a camera. It was a smile for himself. A sharp pang of loss hit her, more violent than the day she was served the papers. In that moment, she realized what she had truly destroyed. She hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost the witness to her life. She had traded that deep, quiet security for a cheap thrill that had burned out before it even began. Julian was a distant memory, a mistake she would pay for in installments of regret for years to come. Ethan turned his head. His gaze swept across the crowd. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the expanse of green grass and strolling families. Sarah held her breath, waiting for him to wave, waiting for him to look angry, waiting for him to acknowledge their shared history. Ethan simply nodded. It was a small, polite nod, an acknowledgement of existence, not an invitation. Then he turned back to the path. He tucked his sketchbook under his arm and began to walk away, his stride long and steady, moving deeper into the city he helped build, moving into a future that belonged entirely to him. Sarah watched him until he disappeared behind a cluster of blooming magnolias. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, whispering through the park. She shivered, pulled her coat tighter, and turned back to the strangers waiting for her, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The winter was over, but some colds never really left.